On the evening of October 10th, 1911, Helen Velasca Berry, a young suffragist, went home after what she thought was another defeat for women's right to vote in California. The early poll returns from the large cities in the Bay Area showed that it had not passed. This was not the first disappointment for the women's suffrage movement in the Golden State. In 1893, a women's suffrage bill had been passed by the state legislature only to be vetoed by the governor as unconstitutional. 3 years later, a statewide referendum on women's suffrage was defeated. These defeats only spurred the true grassroots organization, women's suffrage groups, and reinvigorated them with each of these setbacks. The day after the election, the San Francisco Chronicle led with a front-page headline declaring the defeat of the 1911 referendum. It was accompanied by a photo of very stern-faced suffragists. And they had a banner that said, "Vote yes on 8." Does anybody here remember seeing photographs of the 1948 picture with Truman holding the Chicago Times that said Dewey wins? Well, just bear that in mind for the rest of this story. 2 days after the polls had closed, the Chronicle buried below the fold the column proclaiming women's suffrage had actually won, narrowly. Another strange thing about the Chronicle's Wednesday photo was the banner identifying the resolution as number 8. On the poll, the actual number of the measure was 4, but politics in 1911 were as dirty as they are today. The most vocal opponents of women's suffrage were the liquor industry and the other industrial giants who feared that women's suffrage would mean the outlawing of liquor and pressure for workplace reforms like 8-hour workdays, equal pay, and safe workplace regulations. The question on women's suffrage had been originally assigned the number 8. It would have been the 8th Amendment to the state constitution. At the last minute, opposing powers were able to have the question switched with number 4, which had been originally assigned to the recalling of an official. It was actually the first official recalling that happened in California. All of the campaigning in favor of women's suffrage had directed the voting men to vote yes on 8. On the day of the election, it would take a concerted effort to read and realize the switch had been made. Question 8 ended up winning by a large margin. The grassroots campaign organized women's social groups, clubs, church clubs, educational groups, but it wasn't a matter of just galvanizing the women of California. It would be voting men who would decide if women should have the right to vote. In order to spread the word to the voters, the activists devised a number of creative activities to attract men to gatherings where they could talk to them. One campaign involved driving a very snazzy car, the Blue Liner, around the state. Wherever they parked the car, it attracted numbers of interested men, and then they talked to them about why women should have the right to vote. At one rally in Los Angeles, the police said the women did not have a permit to speak for public speaking and started to break up the assembly. In response, the women demonstrators began singing, and lacking an ordinance restricting singing, they completed the rally in song. On the day of the election, Helen Velasca Berry went back to the suffragists' campaign headquarters to clean up and begin organizing again. In a recording made in 1972, Berry says, "That was one of the most interesting days of my life. People streamed into the office. She had never seen so many people before. They began to give her money. She recruited people to help her. Well, I took in more money that day than I ever took in before," she said. She reported hundreds of people came to sign up for the next campaign. The proclaimed defeat of women's suffrage was based on the early returns in the highly industrial Bay Area. It was the men of the rural and non-industrial areas that gave the women of California the right to vote. The final count was 125,037 to 121,450 to approve women's suffrage. They approved it by 3,587 votes. That's an average of 1 vote per district. Here in Solano County, the vote was 1,438 in favor and 1,152 opposed. The enlightened men of Solano County deserve recognition for their fairness and their role in the expansion of the democratic franchise. Winning the right to vote in 1911 seems ridiculously late. But once it finally happened, people quickly start to think of it as obvious and natural. We forget how hard it was to win. I am very grateful for all the hard work and dedication it took to win California women the right to vote 100 years ago. And I invite you to join us in celebrating the centennial of California women's right to vote. This is history as it is slipping from our grasp. Many of us have heard stories from our grandmothers about the events leading to women's right to vote. This is a chance to try to keep that connection, to try to make it real for each of us.
I hate history. I mean, why do we need to study things that already happened? Here we go. Women reformers also fought for the right to vote, or suffrage. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony founded the National American Women Suffrage Association in 1890 to get women the vote. That same year, women gained the right to vote in Wyoming. Colorado, Idaho, and Utah followed in the 1890s. Carrie Chapman Catt had fought successfully for women's suffrage in the West.
I lived in Boston, Massachusetts during the early years of my marriage, and I founded the Equal Rights Association, where women came to me and discussed social issues, literature, and art, as well as direct their efforts towards the betterment of society. Women always had the intellect, and now we had a place to display it. And those Boston Club women did more than listen and talk. They were the force behind the first school law that allowed women to be elected to the Boston School Board. And when that door opened, the door to all the public institutions flew open. Club One in Boston helped start a kindergarten system, promoted higher education for young women, raised and awarded scholarship money, and started the Girls' Latin schools. I was an activist for the social reform when I lived in Boston with my friend Susan B. Anthony. I attended many national and regional women's rights conventions. And in 1866, we started the Equal Rights Association. And I helped found the American Women's Suffrage Association in 1869.
But I decided to bring my beliefs and meet some like-minded women, so I started 3 women's clubs. The largest one, the Friday Morning Club, was the center of social reform efforts for the city and had over 1,000 women members. These women gave classes. Although age and infirmity have limited my role in this 1911 campaign, the thousands of California club women throughout the state have become a marching army of suffragists. They're the ones speaking on street corners, canvassing neighborhoods, raising money for the amendment, and ensuring a yes vote from their husbands, sons, and male friends. When women win the vote this October, they will then be able to register to vote, as I will. I'm 91 years old. If I live to 1912, I'll be able to register to vote for the first time in my life. And it's about time. I've been working for women's suffrage for more than 60 years.
My name is Maud Younger. For 5 years, I worked in the New York Settlement House where I met many social reformers. I tutored poor immigrant women to learn English and survival skills needed for life in the slums. From my experiences of working with the immigrant poor taught me the importance of being politically active, especially that women needed the vote. The first thing I did when I got back to San Francisco was establish the city's first women's waitresses union. Men waiters had a union, but did not allow women to join. My experiences as a waitress drove me to lobby hard at an 8-hour workday law and that wages and food and working conditions needed to be regulated. I always wear my union button, whether on an evening gown or on a runabout. People call me the millionaire waitress. But that wasn't all. I encourage all working women and union members to join the California suffrage campaign. I speak at union halls, and I recently published a pamphlet called Why Wage Earning Women Should Vote. My writings are aimed towards the working class voters.
Because of my work with the wage unions, I'll be driving to the Wage Earners Equal Suffrage League's float down Market Street in the San Francisco 1911 Labor Day Parade. It will be drawn by 6 white horses with working class women holding suffrage banners. But on October 10th, 2011, when we are successful in passing the Women's Suffrage Amendment, California's working class women will have the voice in making the laws that are essential to them. After that win, it'll be on to Washington, D.C. to be the legislative branch of the National Women's Party, and to help get the vote for every woman in the United States. I believe that to no class of people is the ballot so essential as to the women who work for wages. The objection so often heard that the woman's sphere is the home cannot be urged upon the women who must go out into the world and work alongside these men just to preserve that home. And the greater burdens of the industrial world fall upon her and her children. Those who are weakest work the longest and for the lowest wages.
When the California's Women's Rights Amendment passes on October 10th, it'll be the greatest day of my life. West Coast suffragists created a banner with a star for each state where women had won their right to vote. I have been working to put California's name on that 6th star of the suffrage banner for 20 years. I am Selena Solomons. As a suffragist, I was involved in many aspects of campaigning for the votes for women in 1896 and made my first public speech at the Golden Gate Hall. Many famous suffragists came to the first campaign, but it ended in defeat. The men of San Francisco, the largest county, had voted no. But now it's 1911, and we have another chance at persuading the men of San Francisco to give us the vote. I am the president of the San Francisco Votes for Women Club and a political organizer.
Let me tell you how lunch and tea are winning us the vote. I believe that suffrage clubs should be open to everyone, from all classes in society. At my own expense, I have rented a large loft in the retail district of San Francisco at 315 Sutter Street. The space has a restroom, a reading room, a serving room, and a kitchen. For 5 cents on a typical day, you can choose from 4 types of soups, clam chowder, tomato, potato, chicken noodle, 5 kinds of salads, fried sand dabs, creamed codfish, and homemade cakes. Our customers are women shoppers, sales girls, and also men. More than food, we offer nourishment of the possibility of voting equality. I also organize groups of women to walk local districts in San Francisco, women going from our dining room to the streets of San Francisco lobbying for the vote. On Election Day, we will have 1,000 women in all the polling places of San Francisco to make sure there aren't any fraudulent votes. And when it is won, we will have the last and best of all suffrage banquets. I intend to tell the story of this campaign. The plays, poems, speeches, lobbying, fundraising, arm-twisting efforts of California women. And most importantly, I will list all the names of the hundreds of men and women who worked for the success of this amendment. It will be a first-hand account of this history-making event. How we won the vote in California. Finally, a 6th star will be added to the suffrage banner.
Check this out. Did you know that 100 years ago, women couldn't vote?
No, I didn't.
Well, these girls named Caroline, Maud, and Selena fought for us. And now, here in California, we, women, can vote.
Wow, that's cool.
Hey, wait, what are these?
I don't know.
It says, it's a man's world unless women vote.
It's a man's world unless women vote.
Equality. Is there more?
As women, we need to do all we can to bring our own brand of style, our kind of compassionate leadership.
It is so critical for over 50% of the population to have a voice.
What first comes to mind is the concept of fairness and equity, and the sort of culture around that.
Women make up at least half the population and are so smart and intelligent They bring to city politics the feeling of family and connectedness to the community.
Women represent more than half of the 51% of the population. They care deeply about the education of youth.
Fundamentally, it's just equal rights. It's a civil rights issue.
But one of the things I love about the fact that I live in Solano County is that we have a strong history and a strong influence of women leadership. And right now, Benicia has a woman mayor. It has a woman supervisor. It has a woman assembly leader and a woman senator. So when you look at who is effectively making policy choices on behalf of this city, it is predominantly women. And so I like to think that the brand of leadership that they and we all can bring is good for all of the people in our county.
But I think as we look back in history, we find that women are the ones that stand up, particularly at times of war, to advocate for peace and justice rather than for conflict.
So this whole concept of protecting and nurturing our children, raising up our community for the future, certainly women having the vote means that women are thinking about that when they vote. It also means that people who are in power and people who seek a vote think about those things if they're good at it. They think about the things that are important to women as a whole.
We've elected some more women-oriented candidates who have been able to put forth some of the issues that are so important to women, including equality, equal pay, equal work, things like that.
Women's vote has changed history. We now are a representative democracy. Before we only had a small portion of people represented in voting, and since women have had the right to vote, a large, 51% of our population has been included and has a voice.
Certainly it's influenced local politics. One of the best examples in San Francisco with the first woman attorney general, district attorney, I'm sorry, she, who's also attorney general now, she pointed out how few domestic crimes had been investigated and prosecuted until there were 2 women who were attorney generals in the state. That's really important to women because what happens at home, either as a young child, a girl child, or as a young woman or a woman in a house, if they don't have anyone in their corner, then they can feel really trapped, and we have lots of evidence of that. So that's a profound change, which I'm not too sure people fully appreciate the magnitude of that issue. That it's my inherent responsibility. It's an affirmative action on my part to show that while I may have to hold my nose and vote in state and federal elections, I still take that very seriously. But voting for me as an elected person also means that I am guiding a decision that's going to affect people in a very direct way. One of the interesting things I like about local government is that you can see the results of your actions almost immediately, and that's very rewarding. The very room we are in is part of a decision that I had a whole lot to do with, both as advisory and then as voting and guiding that vote and making sure that we would get a majority vote to move forward.
That's my patriotism, voting. That's a moment that means a lot to me each session, each time we get to vote. I'll say this, I work in the California Democratic Party. I'm at the state level, and a lot of what we're working on now is getting people to vote by mail because of the predictability factors, because of the convenience to get more people involved, and I think that's great, I really do. And I want to support that. But for myself, I still love to go into the poll. I've taken my daughter with me, holding her hand every time since she was old enough to walk in, because there's that moment where we all get to invest in the future of this country, and it's very powerful. I don't think there's anything like it. So that's what that means to me.
Voting is something I look forward to every year. I take seriously. I research. I don't vote by mail. I want to go to the polls. I enjoy that experience. I walk proudly around with my sticker that says I voted.
So many people fought and died for the right for us to vote. And I think that for me it is the basic building block of democracy. For my children, when they were younger, we actively engaged them in participating around the kitchen table in political discussions. We were early vote-by-mail people around our household so that we could have the ballots out, so that we could show our children what the ballot statements look like, what the voter guides contained. We wanted to encourage them to look at voting as not only a sacred right and a privilege, but something that it was their civic responsibility to engage in.
Voting to me is one of the best things about being a citizen. We get to be involved in our community, we get to have a say in who our leaders are, and we get to have a say in how our communities are going, the directions they're following, the ideals that they're implementing. So it is the best thing